Let's now take a break from building our project and build a small, reusable and flexible star rating component. So what we want to build is a component like this one. So it displays multiple stars, and then as we hover over them, it displays the currently selected rating here on the right side. So as you see, as we hover over the stars, it always shows the currently selected number of stars, and if we click here, then that number stays fixed. And if we then click again, because this movie is definitely a 10, then of course we can also change that rating. Okay, now we will develop this component here in complete isolation, so outside of this current application, so that we could reuse it anywhere we wanted and also make it really flexible by allowing for different props. For example, here we can rate between 0 and 10 right now, but we will make it so that the user of the component can choose what number of stars they want to display. And that's just one of the things that we will do. But anyway, let's now come here to our project and then let's create a brand new component file here. So star rating, and then export default function and then the name of the component. So star rating, and for now we won't accept any props here. We will leave that for later. And now let's just return something here. And now what I want to do is to actually come to the index.js file and then no longer import the app here for now, and also not the CSS file. Because again, this component should be completely reusable, and so it shouldn't depend on any external CSS files. So instead, what I want to do now is to import that star rating. And you see that VS Code automatically wrote our import statement here. And if for some reason your VS Code didn't help you with this autocomplete, then just make sure to type exactly this. Then finally, we also need to remove this one here temporarily and instead include our star rating here. And I'm doing it like this just so that we don't have to create a brand new project just for building this one component. So for now, we will just use this project that we already have instead of creating a new Create React app. But anyway, let's give it a save now. And now here you see that hello that's coming from here, so from the star rating. So let's close the app and this sidebar, and then let's get started. So starting with the JSX here, so just with the structure, we see that we have basically two main elements. So we have one container for all these stars, and we have then like this message here, so the current rating on the right side. So inside our div, let's place another div for those stars, and then one paragraph for that message. So for now, let me just place a number here, and here for the stars, we want to dynamically generate these star elements. So instead of writing them by hand one by one, because that's the only way in which we could sometimes have 5 stars, in other situations 10 stars, or really any other number. So let's use the technique that we used before in the far away app. So entering JavaScript mode, and then we can write array.from, and here we can then specify an object with the length property, and let's set it here to 5 initially. And so this then creates an empty array with 5 elements that we can then immediately loop over by passing in a function, so like a map function, here as the second argument. So in this function, we are not interested in the elements themselves. So let's just use a placeholder variable, but we are interested here in the number. All right, and now here we can just render anything. Let's just do a span element for now, but later we will place the stars in here. So let's just write S for star, and then here the number. And actually this should be S plus 1, because I, of course, is 0 based here. Okay, and this should already be something. And indeed, we see star 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, which of course, again, are just placeholders for now. Here we have some error, which probably, yeah, it's because of that key prop. So let's add that key here. Well, actually we don't, because this is just temporary anyway. Okay, so now let's define some styles here. And remember how I said initially that we cannot depend on any external CSS file or CSS classes. And therefore, we need to define all our styles inline. So let's do that, starting here with the parent element. And so here we now need to specify an object. And why not actually do that here as a separate object outside? So let's write container style. Then let's set the display property to flex. So to place the two elements side by side. Then align items. Let's set that one to center, which will align the items vertically. And then let's also specify a gap of 16 pixels. Okay, and now here we can just specify that. Give it a save, and that looks already a bit better. And now we can do even better, which is to take this entire object, which will never change, and it doesn't depend on anything that is here in the component, and we can place it completely outside of the component. And by doing so, this object here will not have to be regenerated by JavaScript each time that this component here re-renders. Because otherwise, each time that the component does re-render, this function will get called again, and so then this object would also get regenerated again. And so that's not necessary, and so we can just place it outside here. Now next, let's also create some styles for the other container. So this container here with the stars. So let's say star container style. So let's also do display flex and then give it a gap here of just 4 pixels for now. All right. And finally, just some styling here for the text. So text style, let's say line height. Yeah, I was trying to write some actual CSS, but in JSX, remember, we need to write our property names camel cased. So not line dash height, but line height like this. Let's also specify a margin of 0. And here let's actually say 1. So this probably won't change a lot yet, but it's going to be important later. So style. Okay, and now to finish, let's do what I said right in the very beginning, which is to basically allow the user of this component to set the maximum amount of stars. So the maximum rating. So coming back here, let's say that as the user of this component, I wanted to pass in the max rating, for example, as 5. Now then, maybe I wanted to use this component at some other place in my application, but here I wanted 10 stars. But now as we reload, of course, both of these components will only have 5 stars because we hard-coded that value here in our rating. So what we need to do is to now accept that prop here, max rating, and then use that right here. And so this is why we had to use this trick here instead of manually writing the number of stars. So instead of writing one element here per star. And so if I save this now, you see that indeed we get now 10 stars here. Great. But now, what if someone used this component without specifying the max rating property? So since we're building a highly reusable component, we need to account for all these situations, because we will never know who is actually going to use this component and what props they will specify. So we need to account that this might happen. So in this case, we have a problem, because then, well, we have exactly no stars. So what we need to do is to set a default value for the rating. So how do we do that? Well, we can actually leverage the power of destructuring in JavaScript, because whenever we destructure an object, we can actually set a default value as we do so. And so here we are actually destructuring the props object. And so if max rating doesn't exist, we can set a default simply by writing this. And so if we save this now, then we are back to having our 5 stars by default. And so this is a very common way of setting default props in React applications. We will do this all the time as we go through the course.